So the neuroscience kind of in the backdrop of this is that, when we move out of our boundaried space, when we find our voice to stop others from defining ourselves or defining others, we find our voice. And there really is something that stimulates what's called the smart vagus nerve, right, which is a part of our sympathetic nervous system. It decreases some of that stimulation. So it allows it frees us up. There's a actually liberating experience within us when we talk and tell, when we use our language to define ourselves for ourselves. So that's that piece. And then there's open outreach, when we open our hearts and our minds and our bodies to really deconstruct, this hurtful impact of what is happening either to us or around us. And we replace that with some kind of healing interaction. So that's the outreach part. When we're open, it grounds us in a larger experience, something other than ourselves. So there's a wholeness and a oneness, that piece around belonging to something bigger than you. It actually helps to soothe the pain pathways that are activated in our brains, that are being activated through the social exclusion. So when we look outward to others in hopes of moving into this physiology of healthy connection, we are actually healing ourselves. So that open outreach is really tough to do, but it is one of the more critical steps. And then last is this partnered protest, that we must come together and not just partner to protest or push back against what we're seeing in the way of fragmentation or these divisive activities and actions that are happening around us, but we also have to produce it. We have to do something with it. So it's partnered protest and production. How do we use our networks, our mind and our body to develop action that counters what is happening and create a new reality? And in this way, we're really moving into this physiology of acceptance. And that's happening within healthy relationship. And out of that is this lasting strength. And that comes from being centered and held within healthy relationship. And that's where liberation really occurs.
And so as I listen to you talk about this, I think that one of the challenges is COVID. Mm-hmm. And COVID, you keep hearing this language, and you brought up the importance of language and how we're defined. And when you hear the language of socially distancing,
right,
and what that does when we really are physically distancing, and how do you, in a COVID, with all of this that's going on, and you've written a piece about that, how are you seeing people manage, and what would you give, how do you take that theory and make it practical application for people to begin to implement in their lives in the midst of physical, and for some people, it is social distancing because they really are isolated from others. How do we make this practical application for them in the midst of what we're going through?
Mm-hmm. And it is a challenge for sure. And I think that's where I started in, it's my reflection in that piece was just the language itself, that we are using this term social distance so casually. But in fact, it is really signaling this disconnection. And we know that, yes, again, we are wired to connect. So relational disconnection is not what we're seeking out. And when we say that, the language itself becomes commonplace. So these days, I'm really kind of mindful of what has become even jargon, just so common speak, and that we end up adapting to it in some ways. And
yes,
I'm really conscious that that's one effort. That's one thing we can actually really try to do is mind our language, really hear what we're saying, and redirect that in different ways and reframe it. So if we need to stay physically distant, but socially connected, then that's the goal.
Yes.
So that even, the terms like 6 feet apart, right? That's an actual measurement. We know that it's physical distance, but socially connected. So again, we're doing it now, right? We're trying to figure out what are the technology platforms that are allowing us to remain connected, and at the same time, being mindful that, not one size fits all. There are people, yes, who, I think often of our elders and our infants. I'm always thinking of, either end of our developmental continuum, are very young, who either are reliant on others to keep them connected, be it through technology or in other ways. So there's that piece around power that I'm very mindful of. What are we doing to support and enable our parents and our caregivers our educators to fully support our youngest, to be adequately and fully connected in a day and age when we know that we need to stay physically distant. And in the same token, our elders, be they in a home where they're living with multi-generational or assisted living or by themselves, where technology might pose a barrier of some sort. And again, what are we doing more overtly and intentionally to meet the needs of those that are probably also very much dealing with issues of isolation, as you mentioned? And very concerned at this moment around just our emotional well-being.
Yes.
Being so disconnected, right? Yeah. So again, we want to be mindful of our language, and then we want to think about what are some of the ways that we're partnering together to think about making sure that there are the resources, practical and otherwise, to help keep us connected. These regular check-ins. We can use the old-fashioned landlines, those that still have them. I know that in some of my outreach efforts, we were finding that, right? There were some of our elders who didn't even have the smartphones, so we had to, go to the old school and make a time. Sit by the phone at 6 o'clock. We'll make sure that we're going to call and check you. So,
and I love you know that, and I love the work that you're doing, because so much of what I'm about, and this is the relationship piece. And I really hope that listeners begin to delve deeper into how are you looking at the context of relationships and what we've been taught, and how sometimes the language that has been used, or even the frameworks that we've been a part of, we've just accepted, and they're not necessarily in our best interest. And so how do you begin in this season to reimagine possibilities of creating healthy relationships that serve all of us well, and we can all benefit? It doesn't mean that someone has to lose and someone wins. We all can benefit in this scenario when we think about the tenets of relational cultural theory. And I know that we're coming to a close, Karen, but one of the things that you talk about is motherhood. And you've written a lot about motherhood. What would be some lessons that you've learned as a mother that you'd want to share with our audience?
It's another big ticket, right? Right as we're closing. But I will say I have thought a lot about this. And I guess, there is probably one core thing that I certainly have experienced and felt myself. And that is something that I've often thought about in the work that I do, particularly, I think, at this moment that we're in. But there are some through lines and some common threads in motherhood broadly that I feel are really poignant, particularly in the midst of this Black Lives Matter movement, but that really kind of supersede across. And that's this kind of undergirding truth around the duality of being able to hold both pain and joy alongside one another. The central role of that feels like it's such a hallmark of what it means, particularly for those that have been disenfranchised here in the Americas, that this both and space is a form of resistance in and of itself. And so even as we think about W.B. Du Bois and, double consciousness and all of this, that there's something really powerful in this nexus. There's, I believe, where there's brilliance that really resides in being able to hold both pain and joy. And then particularly around motherhood and Black motherhoods in particular, I'm reminded that in the midst of all of this, we have the Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mom, and Mamie Till, and, the more current story, Serena Williams, these Black women, these Black mothers in the midst of their pain, gathering themselves and using it as a platform to really bring liberation to others, to speak out and to use it as a platform for resistance, but by showcasing their resilience through it all. And in so much that we can really find places for joy in there. So I would really highlight that. That feels really salient and significant at this moment. That can't hold us back.
And I love that, because it is this both and that we have to be able to balance that in the midst of all that we do, and it can be done. You're obvious and evident of that being done. And so, Karen, as we come to a close, what are ways that people can connect to you? social media.
Oh my goodness, all the different ways.
Yes.
I would say,
Website,
all of
email.
those, right? Please find me for sure. I would say what I'm probably most excited by is this new venture with the Wellness Collaborative Incorporated. And you can find us at thewellnesscollaborative.org. My email is Craddock, KCRADDOCK, at thewellnesscollaborative.org. And this is an interdisciplinary effort where we are looking in the ways of bringing together folks from across disciplines to creatively and innovatively bring together good thoughts and practices to those that are most marginalized. So closing these areas of health and wellness disparities in very active and actionable ways to reimagine health and wellness. And it's pretty exciting. We've got some programming that we're doing online and in person, and working with everyone from artists, filmmakers to urban agriculturalists, ER doctors, pediatricians, psychologists. So it's very exciting. You can certainly look for me there. And at the Wellesley Centers for Women at Wellesley College. And you can find my page there as well. And there I'm also exploring Black and Indigenous women and the creative and overlapping interdisciplinary and intersectional ways that Black and Indigenous women are also experiencing and defining themselves. And that's me.
And I told you all, she is a baddie. I am so honored to have her on the show. And we've done good because normally we cannot talk for 30 minutes. There is no way we get on these conversation topics, and it could be 2 hours of us just talking and enjoying each other. And I love her brilliance and what she does to impact so many people's lives. And so, Dr. Karen Craddock, thank you for being a guest on the show. This is another episode of The Tapestry, a show designed to listen to the voices of women and to see the power in all of our narratives. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Karen Craddock, for being on the show.
It is my absolute pleasure, François. Take good care.